Zara was known as the deadliest warrior of her planet. She had never lost a battle, never shown mercy. Her name was feared across human colonies, but now she lay in chains, dragged across the steel floor of a human military base. Her armor was cracked, her left arm bleeding, her silver eyes dull from exhaustion. She had fought to the end, but this time, the end had come for her. The guards surrounding her didn't hide their hatred. They whispered curses and threats. Some spit near her feet. To them she was a killer, a monster who had taken the lives of their friends and brothers. But none dared to touch her, not without orders. They all waited for Commander Jace, the man who had finally brought her down. They believed he would do what no other human leader dared to execute her, slowly and painfully, inside the command room. Jace stood behind a thick glass wall. He watched her being dragged in, her head still, held high, even in defeat. He had heard of her before Zara, the Bloodfire. They called her, but what he saw now was not a monster. She looked like a proud, wounded animal who refused to die quietly. Still dangerous, still beautiful. "Bring her to me," he ordered calmly. The guards hesitated. "Sir, she's unstable." "Even now," I said, "bring her," Jace repeated, his voice cold. Zara was pulled forward and dropped on her knees in front of him. The soldiers raised their guns just in case she made a sudden move. But she didn't. She looked up slowly, her eyes locking with his. There was silence for a long moment. Then she spoke in a voice so low, yet clear enough for all to hear. "Don't kill me, human. I'll warm your bed." Gasps echoed through the room. The soldiers looked at one another in confusion. Some in disgust. Jace didn't react right away. His eyes stayed on her, searching, studying. Was it a trick? A final insult? Or a desperate offer? Zara didn't blink, didn't look away. Her pride was still there, but something behind it had broken. Maybe it was her wounds. Maybe it was the way she had been treated like a beast since her capture. Or maybe, deep down, she didn't want to die in silence and pain. She wanted to live, no matter the cost. Jace knelt down in front of her, his face calm, unreadable. "You think that will save your life?" he asked quietly. Zara didn't answer. Her lips trembled just slightly, but she kept her eyes steady. "I've seen soldiers beg, scream, cry," he continued. "But you offer yourself like a gift." Still, she said nothing. Jace stood up slowly, then looked at the guards. "Take her to the medical bay," he ordered. "Clean her wounds, remove the chains, and give her food, sir." One of the guards said in disbelief. "She is not a threat anymore," Jace said. "Not today." Zara was lifted again, this time not as roughly. She didn't fight it, but she didn't speak either as they pulled her away. She looked back. Once, her eyes meeting Jace's again, and this time, with something else in her stare. Not fear, not hatred, but confusion. Why didn't he kill her? Why show mercy to a creature like her? Zara had been trained to see humans as weak, emotional, too soft to win real wars, but Jace didn't seem weak. He seemed controlled. Precise and dangerous in a way she couldn't understand. Inside the medical bay, human nurses worked silently. To heal her, they didn't speak to her, didn't look at her with kindness. But they followed Jace's orders. Warm water, soft towels, bandages, and a simple set of clothes. Zara stared at her reflection in the glass wall-bruised face. Blood on her lips, chains removed, yet still trapped. Later in a small room with no guards. Just a locked door. Zara sat quietly. The food in front of her remained untouched. She didn't understand what game the human commander was playing. But she was still alive, and that meant the game was still going. She whispered to herself, her fingers tracing the scars on her arms. "Why didn't he kill me?" And outside, in the dim hallway, Commander Jace stood quietly. He didn't know the answer either. But something in her voice, those 6 trembling words, had struck deeper than he expected. The alien warrior was his prisoner, but maybe she would become something more. Zara sat in the quiet room, the dim lights casting shadows across the walls. Her body was healing slowly, but her mind was restless. She kept replaying the moment she had knelt before the human commander. Those words spoken in weakness felt like a blade cutting her pride. She hated herself for saying them, but even more, she hated how he didn't use them against her. He hadn't touched her, mocked her, or killed her. Instead, he gave her silence, warmth, and space. Why? The door hissed open. Commander Jace stepped in without guards, carrying a metal tray with food and a bottle of clean water. Zara stood up quickly, her muscles tensing. She wasn't ready for a second humiliation, not alone, not unarmed, but Jace didn't approach with a weapon or threat. He placed the tray on a table and looked at her calmly. "You didn't eat yesterday," he said, his voice low. "I'm not hungry," Zara replied coldly. "Liar," he said, with a slight smirk. "Your body needs fuel to heal. Even a warrior knows that." "I didn't ask for kindness," she snapped. "And I didn't ask for your surrender," he replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I didn't surrender," she said sharply. "I offered survival." There was silence, thick and strange between them. Jace finally sat on a chair near the wall, keeping distance between them. "You think you're a prisoner?" he said. "You're not." Zara narrowed her eyes. Then, "Why am I locked in here?" "To protect you," he replied. "From my own people?" Zara didn't respond right away. She had felt the hatred in the soldiers' eyes. She had heard the whispers, seen the loaded guns aimed at her. Even when she was chained, they didn't want her healed. They wanted her dead. And Jace. He was the only reason she was still breathing. "I don't understand you," she finally said, her voice softer. "Good," Jace said. "That means you're learning something." He stood up and walked toward the door, pausing just before it opened. "You're not a slave," he said, without turning. "And to me, you're not an enemy anymore." When he left, the room felt colder. Zara sat on the floor, staring at the untouched food. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from confusion. No one had ever treated her this way. Not her commanders, not her fellow warriors, certainly not any human. The next day, Jace returned again, this time with a data pad. He handed it to her without a word. Zara looked at the screen. It showed maps, her language translated into human letters. "What is this?" she asked. "Your planet," he said. "Your language, your history, what little we understand." "I won't tell you anything," she said quickly. "I'm not asking you to," he said. "I want to learn, not interrogate." Zara blinked. Uncertain, this wasn't a trick. It wasn't a trap. He truly wanted to know her people, not to conquer them, but to understand them. No human had ever cared about that. They sat together for hours, talking about customs, rituals, the differences. In biology, Zara's pride began to shift. She didn't feel like a prisoner anymore. She felt heard. It scared her, more than any battle she had fought. Later that night, Zara was escorted outside the base, still within the force field, but into open air. She looked at the stars. Breathing deeply, her heart heavy, 2 guards followed. At a distance, but no one spoke. Then she heard footsteps and turned to see Jace walking toward her. "You're not trying to escape," he said casually. "Would it matter if I did?" She asked. "Not to me," he replied, "but it would to the others." Zara looked at him closely. "Do you really believe I'm not your enemy?" Jace's face was unreadable, but his voice was steady. "I believe enemies can change," he said, "and slaves can rise." Zara looked up at the stars again. They seemed different now, cold and distant, but full of unknown stories. She didn't know what this human was doing to her mind, but something had started shifting deep inside her, a quiet storm. "Question without an answer," she whispered to herself, not even realizing it. "If I'm not a slave and not an enemy, what am I?" Jace didn't hear her, or maybe he chose not to answer, but as he walked beside her in silence, their footsteps in sync, Zara began to realize this was not a prison. This was something else entirely. And maybe, just maybe, her real war was only beginning. It started with a single whisper, just one soldier leaning close to another during the night watch. "I think the commander's sleeping with her," he muttered. His friend raised a brow, then looked toward the commander's tent where a soft light still glowed, and that was all it took. By morning, the entire base buzzed with rumors. Zara didn't know about the whispers at first. She had begun training against stretching.
Walking?
Rebuilding her strength. She followed Jace's rules, stayed within the inner compound. never touched a weapon, but she noticed how the stairs had changed. Before, they were filled with fear. Now, they were colder, full of judgment, of disgust, and something worse, jealousy. One female soldier spat near her feet as she passed. Another bumped into her shoulder on purpose. Zara said nothing. She had faced worse than human glares. But something inside her twisted, something she hadn't felt before. Shame, Jace noticed. It too, you're quiet today, he said during their evening walk. Zara didn't answer right away. She looked at him, eyes narrow, voice tense. They think I'm sharing your bed. Jace paused mid-step. He looked surprised, but not angry. I know, he said calmly. Rumors move faster than truth in war camps, and you let them. She asked sharply. I let people think what they want, he replied. I care more about what you think. Zara didn't respond. She didn't know what to think. Her heart beat faster when he spoke to her like that. She hated it, but couldn't. Stop it. She was a warrior, not some soft creature who blushed under a human's gaze. But still, her knees had trembled the first time she saw him smile. That night, alone in her small room, she stared at the ceiling. She remembered the cold chain around her neck when she was captured. She remembered kneeling, broken, offering her life in exchange for warmth. And now, the warmth had come not in the way she expected, but in his words, his protection, his trust. What was this feeling? It's not weakness, but not strength either. The next morning, Zara entered the training yard. She found a wooden staff and began moving, fast, fluid, deadly. Soldiers watched from a distance, whispering again. She's showing off, one said. She's dangerous. Another added, I heard she begged to stay in the commander's tent. A third one muttered. Zara ignored them. But then she heard a voice behind her, loud and clear. Why don't you go back to your own kind, bedwarmer? She turned slowly, her eyes like ice. A tall human soldier stood, their muscles tense, fists clenched, his jaw tight with anger. I lost my brother to your people, he growled, and I saved 2 of yours. Zara answered coldly, including your commander. It doesn't make you one of us, he snapped. I don't want to be. She said simply. He lunged at her, fists flying, but Zara was faster. She stepped aside, grabbed his arm, and flipped him onto the ground with a loud crack. The yard went silent. Everyone stared as the soldier groaned on the floor. Zara didn't. Gloat didn't speak. She turned her back and walked away, but the whispers didn't stop. They only grew louder. She's dangerous. She's got the commander under a spell. She's not one of us. Later, Jace called her to his office. He stood by the window, arms crossed. Watching the soldiers march outside, I heard. What happened, he said, without looking at her. I didn't start it, Zara replied. I know, he said. But it's starting to become a problem. Zara's voice dropped, bitter and sharp. Then lock me up again. Or better, throw me to your men. Let them finish what the war started. Jace turned sharply, walking up to her. You think I kept you alive just to let you get torn apart by fools? He asked. Then what do you want from me? She hissed. I didn't ask for your protection, your attention, or your mercy. Not a prisoner anymore, Zara, he said. You're my guest. And maybe more. Zara's breath caught for a second. More. She echoed. He stepped back, the moment gone as quickly as it came. You need to make a choice, he said. Ignore them, prove them wrong, or walk away. That night, Zara sat outside her room, watching the stars. Her home world was far beyond those lights. Her people would call her a traitor. The humans called her a pet. And yet, she didn't belong to either side anymore. Maybe she never did, but one thing was clear. Zara wasn't running. She would stay, not because of the whispers, or even the commander, but because somewhere deep inside her, she wanted to become something new, not feared, not hated, just understood. Asterisk. The air was still, too still. The bass usually hummed with quiet activity, even at night. But tonight, felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Zara sensed it before anyone else did, a tension in the air, a quiet vibration deep in her bones. She had been trained to feel the calm before a storm, and now that storm was coming. She sat outside her room, eyes focused on the stars. A soldier passed her with a sideways glance. but she ignored him. Then she heard it, a low whine, barely audible like energy cutting through the sky. Zara stood instantly, muscles tight. She didn't need a scanner to know they were coming. Suddenly, alarms screamed across the base. Red lights flashed. Boots pounded the ground, and shouting filled the air. Zara ran toward the sound without thinking. Not away, but toward the danger. Explosions rocked the outer wall. Figures emerged from the smoke tunnel, armored aliens with glowing weapons. Her people. Her own kind had come for her, but something felt wrong. They weren't a rescue squad. They were executioners. Zara watched in horror as they shot at the human guards. No warnings, no mercy. These weren't her elite unit. These were death squads, sent to erase what they considered betrayal. From the upper tower, Commander Jace shouted orders. He was trying to control the chaos. Zara grabbed a fallen soldier's stunned staff and dashed into the fight. She struck hard, fast, spinning through the attackers like a ghost. An alien raised his blade to strike a human medic butt. Zara tackled him. Slamming the staff into his throat, the medic stared at her, confused. Why? Why are you helping us? He gasped. Zara didn't answer. She didn't know herself. More screams echoed. Fire lit the sky as fuel tanks exploded. The gate cracked open from the force of repeated blasts. Zara spotted Jace on the ground now, his arm bleeding, trying to pull a wounded soldier to cover. Another alien charged at him, blade raised. Zara didn't think she just moved. She leapt in front of the commander. Taking the hit across her shoulder, the blade burned through flesh, but she held on, with a wild scream. She slammed the staff into the attacker's chest. Dropping him cold, Jace looked up, blood on his face, eyes wide. You saved me, he whispered. Zara collapsed to her knees beside him, breathing hard. This doesn't make us allies, she said weakly, but I won't let them kill you. He pulled her up with his good arm. Together, they stumbled into a shelter as the remaining guards held off the last wave. When the battle ended, bodies littered the Bassalian and human alike. Smoke rose into the night sky like black clouds choking the stars. Hours later, silence returned. Wounded were rushed to medical. Defenses were repaired, and Zara was laid. On a bed in the emergency unit, half conscious, her wound wrapped tight, Jace sat beside her, not speaking. He just watched her breathe. The warrior who once tried to kill him had nearly died saving him. When she woke, the first thing she saw was his face. He looked tired, older, softer somehow. You should have let them take me, she whispered. Never, he said simply. Zara turned her head away. I betrayed my kind tonight, she said, voice shaking. They'll hunt me now. You didn't betray anyone, Jace said. You chose something different? Different? She scoffed. I don't even know who I am anymore. You're not their weapon, he said quietly. And you're not my prisoner either. Tears stung Zara's eyes. She hated it. Warriors didn't cry, but this pain wasn't from wounds. It was from something deeper, something breaking open inside her chest, a part of her that had been locked away for years. Jace stood up. Reaching for the blanket and pulling it over her, he moved to the door, but paused. You said once you'd warm my bed, he said, without turning. Zara closed her eyes, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't mean it, I know, he replied, but you protected my life. That means more than any promise. He left, the door hissing shut behind him, and Zara. The warrior feared across planets, lay silently in the dark, not because of pain. Ain't because for the first time someone had chosen to protect her. Not for power, not for war, just for her. Zara dreamed of fire, not the kind that burned buildings or lit the skies with war, but a soft fire, warm hands, quiet words, and a heartbeat not her own. She woke slowly, expecting pain, chains, and shouts. Instead, there was soft light, clean sheets, and silence. She sat up, surprised to find no guards outside her door, only a folded set of human clothes left on the table, not prisoner rags, real clothes, simple but warm. A small note rested on top, written in neat handwriting. You've earned more than fear, J. Zara. Stared at the note for a long time. What did he mean? She had bled for them, fought beside them, but earned what exactly? Trust? Forgiveness? A place? The question stayed in her chest as she changed and stepped outside. The base had changed since the night attack. Fewer cold stares, fewer murmured insults. Some soldiers even nodded at her as she passed. One of them, the same medic she had saved, handed her a ration bar. He didn't say a word, just a small nod of thanks. Zara took it with a slow, stunned hand. She wasn't used to kindness, not without suspicion behind it later. Jace invited her to join a patrol around the base's perimeter. She hesitated at first, then agreed, walking beside him. She noticed how natural it felt now. No tension, no fear, just footsteps and rhythm. Side by side, they passed a quiet ridge overlooking the valley, and he paused there. "Do you miss it?" he asked suddenly. "Home?" she said, then nodded slowly. Every day there was silence for a moment. Then Jace looked at her with tired eyes. "You could have left during the attack," he said. "You had a clear path, weapons in reach." Zara didn't answer right away. She bent down, picked up a stone, and tossed it over the ridge. "I thought about it," she admitted, "but I didn't want to. Why not?" He asked gently. "I don't know," she replied, and it was the truth. They walked back in silence, but something heavy had lifted between them. Not erased, but understood. Days passed. Zara started training the soldiers, showing them how. Her people fought, moved, predicted attacks. She taught them how to read alien signals, how to disable enemy armor. At first, the humans were cautious, unsure if they could trust her, but soon they learned. She didn't hold back, didn't lie. She wanted them to survive. They respected that one night. After a long training session, Zara walked into the command tent without knocking. Jace looked up from a screen, surprised. "You should rest," he said. "I don't sleep much anymore." She replied. He stood and poured her a glass of water, handing it to her silently. She drank it slowly, then placed it down. "I said something to you once," she began, not meeting his eyes. "Something." Weak, Jace said nothing, letting her speak. "When I begged you not to kill me," she continued, "I offered myself like I was nothing. You were scared," he said gently. "I was broken," she corrected, "but I'm not anymore." She stepped closer, eyes steady. "I'm not a slave, and I'm not a toy. I never saw you as either, Jace." Said voice firm. Zara's eyes softened just a little. "I believe you now," she whispered. The space between them was close now. She could hear his breathing, feel his presence like heat, but she didn't step forward, and neither did he. It wasn't time yet. Whatever was growing between them, it needed to happen slowly. Not in desperation, but in trust. As she left the tent, a cold wind brushed her face. She looked up at the stars again, so many of them, and still, none felt like home. But something was changing, not just in the camp. Not just in the way the humans looked at her, but inside her. The warrior who once lived only for war now found herself wanting something else. Peace, perhaps, or something close to it, a reason to fight that wasn't about orders or revenge. And when she lay down that night, wrapped in a human blanket, in a room without locks, Zara closed her eyes and smiled. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an enemy or a survivor. She felt like a person, and that was a beginning. The ship landed in silence. No warning, no threat, no sound of war, just a silent descent like a shadow falling over the base. Zara watched from the tower window, her hands tightening around the railing. It was a diplomatic vessel sleek, royal blue, marked with the crest of the Ziraki Empire. Her people, but this wasn't a visit. This was a message wrapped in peace, but carried by knives. Jace stood at the edge of the landing pad as the ramp extended. Zara stayed hidden in the shadows, her heart pounding. Out stepped an emissary, a tall, gold-robed alien with a long neck and cold, flat eyes. He didn't look around, didn't acknowledge the soldiers watching from the walls. He walked straight to Jace and spoke without emotion. "I am Envoy Crass of the Ziraki High Council," he announced. "You are holding a traitor." The word struck like a blade. Zara flinched behind the window. She had expected this day to come, but hearing it aloud made it real. They weren't here to take her home. They were here to erase her. "She is no traitor to us," Jace replied calmly. "She protected this base, saved lives, including mine. The envoy's expression didn't change. She abandoned her command, attacked her own people, and shared Ziraki tactics with a hostile race. Jace's jaw clenched, but he held his ground. She fought for peace, he said. That should count for something. Crass folded his arms behind his back. It does, he said coldly. It means she is dangerous. Zara turned away from the window. She didn't want to listen anymore, but she knew what was coming. A choice. A cruel one. Give her up or risk war. Later that evening, Jace found her sitting outside the medical tent. She didn't look up as he approached. They want you back, he said quietly. I know, she replied, and I know what happens if I go. He sat beside her, silent for a long time. They're offering a ceasefire, he said. If we return you to them. Zara let out a bitter laugh. So peace comes with a price, it always does, he said. Then pay it, she whispered. Let them take me. Jace turned sharply to look at her. No, he said. Not like this. I'm not. Yours to keep, she said, her voice shaking. I was never part of your world. You became part of mine, he replied. You changed it. Tears welled in Zara's eyes. But she refused to let them fall. I was born in war, she said, trained to kill, to survive, not to belong. Well, too bad, Jace said, standing up, because you do belong. He walked away before she could answer, left her sitting in the dark, trying not to feel the ache in her chest. The next morning, the base was quiet. The soldiers stood in formation as the emissary prepared to take Zara away. She walked toward the ship without chains, her head held high, her steps were slow but steady. A warrior to the end, Jace waited at the ramp. Arms crossed, eyes hard. You could stop this, he said to Crass. The envoy raised a brow. This is mercy, Commander, he replied. We could have sent assassins instead. As Zara stepped closer, Jace reached out and took her hand. Everyone watched, stunned. He leaned in and whispered, You're not alone, not anymore. Zara's voice trembled, but she whispered back, I don't want to die. Then, without warning, she turned around and dropped to one knee in surrender. But in defiance, she looked up at the soldiers. Her voice clear and strong. I am not a traitor, she declared. I chose peace. I chose survival. I chose myself. Crass stepped forward, furious. This is not your court. Warrior, but Jace raised a hand, stopping the soldiers from reacting. Then take your offer and leave, he said. She stays. The emissary stared at him in disbelief. You would break the truce for her? I'd break 100 truces to protect those who protect us. Jace answered. Crass turned sharply and stormed back to his ship. The ramp closed behind him, and the vessel rose into the sky without another word. Zara stood frozen, shocked. You just started a war, she whispered. Maybe, Jace said. But at least we're fighting the right one. She looked at him, speechless for once. There was no wall between them, no chain, no line, just two hearts, battered by war. Still standing, still choosing, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They still whispered about her, but the tone had changed. No longer rumors about a traitor or a commander's plaything. Now they spoke her name with a strange mix of respect and fear. Zara, the alien who chose humans over her own blood. Zara, the warrior who defied her empire, stood against her past, and walked into the fire for someone not of her kind. The base had changed since the envoy left. Security was tighter, soldiers trained longer, weapons polished more carefully. Everyone knew war might return, but this time it would be different, because now they had someone who knew how their enemy thought. And she stood at the human's side, not behind them, not beneath them, beside them. Zara had earned her place not with promises, but with pain. Every scar on her body told a new part of the story. Not just a warrior, not just a survivor, but a symbol. She trained daily with the troops, moving like wind and fire. They no longer looked at her with suspicion. Now they listened when she spoke. Because she didn't speak often, but when she did it mattered. One evening, while most of the base rested, Zara stood on the lookout post. She wore no armor, just a simple dark jacket and boots. Her eyes scanned the sky, but her mind drifted elsewhere. She didn't hear Jace approaching until he spoke. You haven't stood down once since the emissary left, he said. She didn't turn to look at him. I don't know how to stand. Still, she replied. You don't have to fight anymore, he said gently. But I want to, she answered. Not for survival. For something more, he stood beside her, close but not touching. I'm still trying to understand who you are now, he admitted. Zara looked at him finally, her expression calm. So am I, she said. All I know is, not the one who begged to warm your bed anymore. Jace smiled softly. I never saw you that way, he said. She tilted her head, teasing just a little, not even for a moment. He laughed under his breath. For a moment, he said, but then you broke 3 of my guards' ribs and saved a squad from your own people. The wind brushed past them, carrying the scent of metal, sand, and fuel, but under it, something. Warm remained, a quiet peace, a strange one but real. Later that night, Zara walked into his tent uninvited. Jace looked up from his holoscreen. Surprised but not startled, she didn't speak at first, just walked to the table, picked up a ration pack and tossed it into the bin. Terrible, she muttered. Jace chuckled. I keep telling the kitchen staff, but they like torturing us. Zara turned, eyes steady, no chains, no orders. No war tonight, she said quietly. He nodded slowly, sensing something in her tone. She stepped closer, heart beating harder than in any battle. I'm not here because I'm afraid, she said. I'm here because I want to be. Jace didn't move, just waited. Zara reached up and touched his face with a hand that had once crushed bones, but now it trembled. He covered her hand with his. Warm and strong, no words were spoken. There didn't need to be. That night, she didn't warm his bed like a slave. She chose to share it as an equal, a soldier, a protector. A woman who had torn herself from everything she'd known just to find something real. And Jace, the commander, who had shown mercy when others wanted blood, held her not like a prize, but like someone who had fought harder than anyone he'd ever known. He didn't own her, he respected her, and that, more than anything, changed her forever. As days passed, the war crept closer again, but the base no longer feared it. They had Zara now, not just as a weapon, but as a mind. A voice, a warning. And at night, when the lights dimmed and silence took over, Jace would wake sometimes to find her watching the stars. What are you thinking? He'd ask. About what I used to be, she'd answer, and what I'm becoming. Because now, the name Zara meant more than bloodfire. It meant loyalty, rebirth, strength, and choice. Not just a bedwarmer, not just a warrior, but someone who would cross galaxies to find one thing no war could take, a place to belong. And someone who saw her not as an enemy, not as a body, but as a soul.